Gavin.
Hey, Louie.
Where are you? I'm scared. It's dark in here.
I'm in the mountains in North Carolina. I'm hanging out with a bear, an actual bear, not the other type of bear.
I was like, okay, relax. It's a family show.
I can't go to Bears in Space this week. It's too expensive.
Oh my god, I think Derek's there this weekend.
Crazy.
Hey guys, this is The Mixed Reviews.
We're a film podcast where we take a film subject such as an actor, director, or mini genre, and we give you a big history, and then we say, this is trash, this is trash, this is trash. Ooh, I like this.
Mama, this is trash. But you know what? Sometimes we find some gems in there.
We truly do.
So we mix up those reviews. We don't like keeping our guests hiding in the wings for too long. So why don't, Gavin, who do we have here with us today?
Why, I see in this dark North Carolina cave, could it possibly be the first guest we ever had on the show? Why, it's Dan Mecca.
Back again.
I forgot I was the first guest. This is so great to be back. Wow.
What's even better is you are technically the first time that anybody has come back to do the full show.
Yes.
Okay.
We've had people on multiple times to do, like Chris and Joe came on to do a review of Widows, and Christy came on to talk about South by Southwest. Both Chels and Morgan have been on to talk about specific movies, but this is the first time anybody's come to do the gauntlet with us again.
Like a second filmography.
Yes. And the first one you did was so good.
Oh, thank you. Wait, can I just tell you what's funny? That we're recording this in honor of the Jane Fonda, which was the first episode. That was the other episode I was on. Mm-hmm. As we are speaking, the final episodes of Grace and Frankie are now available on Netflix. A show that I watched for the recording of Jane Fonda and continue to watch. and I will finish the series now that it's available. It all is because of mixed reviews. Yeah, I got hooked. I did.
I will say it is a show I also watched 4 episodes of and then stopped.
You said, thank you so much. I'm out of here.
Kelly's always like, oh, that show. Yeah, you watch it. Like she says it like the way you would say, like if your partner like had a weird hobby, like, oh yeah, you make airplanes, or like, oh yeah, you like, it's just like, that's like, how she's like, that weird thing you do that I don't like thinking about. Yeah, right, Grace and Frankie.
Grace and Frankie's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Before we get into our new episode, this current episode, and why Dan's back with us today, we have some old business to take care of. Our last episode, we talked about Gavin's favorite episode. He got so much pleasure out of watching for it.
You know what, though? After we did that episode, we swapped bodies, and I learned a lesson. So you know what? I was wrong.
Yeah, there you go. We touched foreheads, made a wish, an eclipse happened, and we swapped. We asked you guys to go online and vote for your favorite body swap movie, and here are the results. So I made this poll when I was kind of sick, and I'm not saying that I forgot my 5-star review, but I was just feeling in a Wish Upon a Star type of way. Regardless, Wish Upon a Star came in at last place with 16%. We got a strong showing for Other. We got a write-in for the original Freaky Friday.
And once again, just as a reminder to the audience, because Other bothers me so much, because if you're going to vote for Other, tell us what you're voting for.
Guys, you're making Gavin mad. You're making Gavin really mad.
I am so mad, you guys.
We actually got, someone saying Fred Savage and Judge Reinhold, hello, which was my pick, so vice versa. It is in there. And then Freaky Friday 2003's version came in second place with 27%. And Gavin's fucked up little pick, 3 Women, with 29%.
Oh, wow, that won the poll, Gavin?
Yeah. No, I have no idea how that happened. I
listen. I listen to every episode. I'm a big fan. You guys do great work. Let me just say, I mean this sincerely. I listen to a decent amount of film podcasts. Obviously, I run my own with Lovely Connor, the B-side on the film stage. But like probably most people with most podcasts, after a certain amount of time, I will usually take a break. You just kind of go like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a couple months off here, and I'll come back and whatever. I listen to some sports podcasts, same thing. You guys, I have to say, I've never done that. Every time it comes up, I listen immediately. I love the podcast. I've never been like, I need a break. I don't need a break. I never need a break from you guys. I mean it.
Say more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
start. Continue.
I think that has a lot to do with like we are a sweet treat, coming to you but twice a month. If that.
Yeah, maybe. I guess because we're similar. B-side, it's like bi-weekly too, right? So I guess, yeah, but you guys do it, right? You guys do it, yeah, bi-weekly / monthly if it's like a bigger subject, right? So yeah. I guess that, but take the compliment though. I don't know. You guys are lovely.
Do.
Yeah, you guys know what you're doing.
Absolutely do.
You guys know what you're doing.
This is not all meant to be a love fest because, we're the mixed reviews. Sometimes we mix up the reviews and everything, but you and Connor are such lovely, insightful people that I never have a problem listening to. And also, by the way, both amazing voices as well. And I think I've told you both that before. I love listening to you guys.
We'll agree. We'll agree on Connor's voice. We will agree on Connor's voice for sure. He has a beautiful, beautiful voice. Him and my wife Kelly, who does voiceover and did voiceover in New York. They both have great voices. So I feel like I'm surrounded by like people who are way better audibly than I am. So, but it's all right. I try.
You do good.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Thank you.
Gavin, I believe we have another 5-star review that we're going to read today.
We do. So at the end of every episode, I mentioned that you can go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And we got another one. And this one is from Coco2121. And it's entitled Fun. And it says, I've been meaning to write this review forever. I love this podcast. I learn something new each episode and get movies to add to my, quote, must-watch list. Gavin and Louis are incredibly charming and strike a perfect balance between informative and irreverent. Love it.
I thought she said irrelevant.
That's just
and
me,
I
babe.
was like, fair.
I've been saying that to Gavin for years.
But thank you. We appreciate that so much. I'm learning every episode. Let me just run and tell that. Okay. Especially, I mean, I don't know if that's a good segue or not into this episode, but I learned a lot, and I think I'm going to learn even more because this is someone that I was not too familiar with outside of, we'd seen a couple of his movies for other episodes. So, Dan, why don't you tell our listeners why we have gathered here on this day?
Yeah, so the subject today is Warren Beatty, who, Louis, it's funny you say that because I think a lot of people probably are like you in that respect where Warren Beatty broke out in 1961, and I know we'll go through his whole history, but for, I would say, 3 decades, he was a legit bankable movie star in Hollywood and one of the more famous people, even kind of writ large in the industry. Mm-hmm. But you're right. The last 3 decades, I don't know that many people would even really know who he is, right? He kind of made only a handful of movies. None of them were really successful. We can kind of talk about that. But if you know him probably now, you know him as the famous / infamous Lothario that he was for many years before he married Annette Bening, who's probably more famous now than he is, right?
Or I would argue people might know him from the La La Land Moonlight.
Oh my God, of course. Oh my God, yes, of course.
His most famous role of the aughts.
Right. Which is funny because no one's ever going to remember that now.
Right.
It's so weird, right? Yeah. So as we're recording, the Will Smith slap heard around the world happened a few days ago. But yeah, you're right. Totally. Of course. Yeah. Warren Beatty and his Bonnie and Clyde co-star Faye Dunaway were the ones who misread. Now, here's the thing. They misread, right? Faye Dunaway said La La Land. It was Moonlight. We all know this. What's funny is it's really, Warren really throws her under the bus if you watch the clip because he opens the envelope and he clearly is confused because he's seeing what we now know as Emma. It said Emma Stone won, right?
Right.
For actress. And so he is like, it looks like he's hamming it up, with Faye and making him wait. And Faye, thinks he's doing that and then grabs the envelope and says La La Land and just
He's like,
You
I'm
know-
not saying anything, girl. You can say whatever you want.
And what's so crazy, and here's what's so crazy about that, Warren Beatty is one of our great, I mean, he was a movie star for sure, but I'd argue the thing he did best was produce.
Yeah.
So it's so funny because if you're a producer,
Right.
like was it Jordan Horowitz who ended up cleaning up the situation like a good producer? It's crazy that Beatty, producer extraordinaire, was just like, nah, I'm just gonna like not do anything.
Let it ride.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
I mean,
Especially as if he's like someone who's like part of the Hollywood pantheon of like,
Totally.
and he on the Oscar stage was like, I don't know what to do. It's like it's very bizarre that he didn't feel comfortable enough to like be like, what the fuck is going on?
I think you're right about that too. And like that's his true power. He is very good at being in command of the moment and being in command of himself as a vessel. Maybe not the best actor in the world. We'll get into it. But like knowing, you know, what is the right move and what is the right next thing.
He's shrewd. He's a shrewd guy.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've never thought about that, and thank you for saying that. Actually, because
it just makes me laugh, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a funny thing when and look, he's older, obviously, right? As we're recording, he's 85, right? It's like he's an older gentleman. He's actually literally tomorrow's his birthday. Isn't that funny?
Oh.
Whoa.
I'm totally not going to be able to get this episode out in time for that.
No,
but
I'm just
I'll try.
saying, but just for the world, right? March 30th, whatever, you know, breaking the fourth wall. But that's just funny as we're so he's 86 as you're listening.
Well, I'm excited to get into Warren. You know, I watched a lot of movies. I didn't catch them all, but like he's got like a very bizarro, kooky career. And so, Gavin, why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. So let's get into that rewind. Henry Warren Beatty was born March 30th, 1937. As Dan just lovingly put, he will be 86 by the time you hear this episode. And by that, I mean the age 86 and not 86th. Oh, no. He was born in Richmond, Virginia. His mother, Kathleen Corinne. She was a teacher from Nova Scotia, and his father, Ira Owens Beatty, was a teacher and a school administrator in addition to dealing real estate. Most people know this. Beatty's older sister is actress Shirley MacLaine, also singer, dancer.
I had no idea.
Did you really not?
No idea.
I
was like, what?
I read a funny interview with him where an interviewer sat down and was like, you know, my mom still refers to you as Shirley MacLaine's younger brother. And he laughed and he was like, you know, I know somebody else who thinks that, Shirley MacLaine. Beatty became interested in movies before his teens when he often accompanied his sister to theaters. One film that had an important early influence on him was The Philadelphia Story, which he saw when it was re-released in the 50s. He thought that Katharine Hepburn looked like his mom. Another film that he loved was 1939's Love Affair, directed by Leo McCarey, and it starred one of his favorite actors, Charles Boyer, which I think says a lot about Warren's acting style.
Yeah. Wow, that's funny.
He found the film, quote, deeply moving, and he recalls, quote, this is a movie I always wanted to make, and spoiler alert, he will. So
He certainly will.
among his favorite TV shows in the 50s was the Texaco Star Theater, which for those that don't know, Texaco Star Theater was essentially like a weekly theatrical program where there'd be different stories each week, and it'd almost be like a live to tape theater show. And sometimes I think things got spun off from it. Sometimes there were pilots on it as well. But for the most part, it was these sort of live theatrical performances. So I totally get why he loved that. Shirley MacLaine, who remembers him often reading books by Eugene O'Neill and singing Al Jolson records. He was very much a product of the pop culture of his time and of the previous decades, which I think plays into what we're going to get, because we're like speeding towards his movie career, but like he's very much a classical leading man
For sure.
before getting into the like new Hollywood stuff that, you know.
Yeah, that's well said, for sure.
MacLaine has also said that her brother had wanted to become a filmmaker, and he would sometimes write, produce, and direct in short films. She said, quote, that's why he's more comfortable behind the camera. He's in the total control aspect. He has to have control over everything, which I can just imagine my sister saying about me. So Beatty has never denied that need. In speaking of his earliest parts, he said, quote, "When I acted in films, I used to come with suggestions about the script, the lighting, the wardrobe, and people used to say, 'What do you want to do? Produce the picture?' And I used to say, 'I suppose I did.'"
Well, I make films, and whether I make them as the producer or the actor-producer or the writer-actor-producer, I don't know. I intend to direct when I'm not acting, and I almost directed Shampoo, and I almost directed Bonnie and Clyde, and each film, toward the end of the preparation period, I realized that I would be better off in having an additional stable mind there to work in this group situation. I am very much a proponent of the group experience in films. I'm not what you would call a great advocate of what the Cahiers de Cinema would call the auteur theory in film. If I produce a film, I like to think that I'm at the helm.
Yes. I don't want to pontificate on your show about this.
Fine.
Because you're editing and I'm not. And so I want to be very clear about what I say.
Imagine, I mean, it's like the most annoying. Just I recently just rewatched Funny Girl. I'm just like struck by like these characters who are like, "Hi, Mr. Ziegfeld. What if I did this instead?" Like it's like you are nothing, you are nobody. And it's the same thing here with him. And I guess that's just the power of, I don't know, being as attractive as he was and being a white dude. I don't know.
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, so I'm even looking here. He played football in high school, and it reminds me of that thing that people say, which is, it's a sociological thing. Why are so many quarterbacks so handsome? Right? There has to be a correlation there, and
I've genuinely never thought about that, but you're right.
And in point in fact, it's because there is a confidence that comes with being tall and handsome, right? If you're like a Warren Beatty, and I think that speaks to be a quarterback, right? In that scenario, you have to be a leader of men, blah blah blah, what have you. So that's why, like Tom Brady, right, Jimmy Garoppolo, like a lot of these people, they're very good-looking people, and that's part of it.
Right. And that kind of like also spilled out obviously into his like love life, which was,
oh God, yeah.
I mean, he was kind of the tabloid man, just like laid the groundwork for every person, certainly for every guy out there who was just being the Lothario. He was fodder for the tabloids for decades.
And I think he loved it. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't think he ever saw it as a negative. I think he saw the sort of like, all news is good news. My name's still in the press. I'm still getting what I want. And so I don't think he ever was like, just taking another lady out. All those photographers are going to be there. It's going to be terrible.
Gavin, would you say that Warren fits perfectly into the movie star category?
Oh, a 100. So as Dan Mecca mentioned, he was a football star at Washington Lee High School in Arlington. And he's seeing his sister become this famous person. She's going out, she becomes a Hollywood star, a household name. And he's like, I can do that. So he's like, aren't I pretty too? Yeah. And so he starts to work as a stagehand at the National Theater in Washington, D.C. during the summer before his senior year. And then after graduation, he was supposedly offered 10 college football scholarships, but turned them all down to go study liberal arts at Northwestern.
Gay. Just kidding. I can make that joke. It's fine.
He joins a fraternity there and then drops out. And he moves to New York City. That's literally it. He moves to New York City and he starts working on acting, studying under Stella Adler at the Stella Adler Studio of Acting. We've talked about famous acting coaches on this podcast before. Stella Adler, very famous. You've heard her name.
It is important to know how to act and to have a technique for acting, and it's a giant help to putting a story together and a movie together if people know how to act and don't just do things by accident and don't just depend on adroit editing to get a performance.
His star starts to rise when he starts working on these like live TV basically stage shows that are shot on film. He works on Studio One, Kraft Television Theater, Playhouse 90, that's 57 to 59. And then he gets cast as a semi-regular on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis during its first season from 1959 to 1960.
How many suits would you say you had?
Oh, well, I'd have to check. I mean, I really couldn't say offhand.
Hey!
All I can tell you is that my closet is 16 feet long.
Oh, God!
Say, would you like to come over after school and take a look at my suits?
Oh, could I?
Oh, now, just a minute.
But during this time, he also lands a Broadway role in which he performs in William Inge's A Loss of Roses on Broadway, and it garnered him a 1960 Tony Award nomination for Best Featured Actor in a Play.
So crazy.
Suspicious at best,
Yes.
I would say. I'm very suspicious about what,
yeah.
And
what happened.
And he wins a 1960 Theater World Award. And this is his only appearance on Broadway.
Yeah, he never goes back to the stage. I love he's like Anthony Hopkins. Like the minute he becomes famous, he's like, no, I'm not going back to the stage.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. He's like, I'm out.
He's like, 8 times a week? Nuh-uh, hun.
Seriously.
So he makes his film debut in 61 in Elia Kazan's Splendor in the Grass, opposite Natalie Wood. This film's huge. Beatty gets nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor and receives the award for New Star of the Year actor from the Golden Globes. The film is also nominated for 2 Oscars, and it ends up winning 1.
I forgot how much that movie, I rewatched it for this. I forgot how much it affected me. I was like weeping 2 nights ago rewatching it. I love Splendor in the Grass.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, this movie is horny. Horny, the movie.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like, I would be hard pressed to think of another movie that so perfectly captures what young love can feel like. I was reminded, I was like, wow, yeah, that is what it's like. Like,
but not just young love, young lust. I mean, this is a
lust,
very,
as well said, lust.
this
yeah,
is a
well said.
very frank, surprisingly frank for 1961 movie about sexual repression.
Oh, yeah.
And the shit Natalie Wood has to do.
Oh, my God.
Like, I think this is maybe Natalie Wood's best performance.
And the same year as West Side Story is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I had never seen this before, and I was just like,
oh my gosh.
yeah, I was just like, what is happening?
I also love a movie when they do like a good literary reference, you know?
Yes.
And so like
Yeah,
having
true.
having her in the classroom and she's like, what does the poem mean? And she's like, I don't know. And freaking out. And then like they say it over again in the Splendor of the Grass. I was like, all right, that worked real. Like that was clean.
I guess we should explain a little bit about the plot of Splendor in the Grass, but it's literally a movie about a young man and a young woman in love, but their love is so horny that they basically can't be together because society's like, no, don't do that.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of it is like Natalie Wood, and her character is grappling with the expectations. Her mom is like, you didn't let anyone go too far, did you? And just like the whole idea that like society's telling you are not good, you are broken, you are unclean, you are bad if you have sex. And meanwhile, he's like, I feel like a crazy person because I want to fuck all the time, and does that make me bad? And complicated relationships with moms and dads. He has his sister who's a loose woman.
The great Barbara Loden, who went on to direct Wanda. You know,
Yes, which is a fucking amazing movie.
Yeah. She's great. Yeah. And there's just like, I love these movies where it's like, you have all these like, it's like a chess board, you know, and everyone has like their really specific job and what they represent. So yeah, I agree, Dan. This movie kind of rocked my world. I've never seen it before.
Now, bud.
Deanie, you're a nice girl.
I'm not.
Now, come on, Deanie. We're going to go back inside.
No.
Come on.
No, I don't want to go back inside.
Deanie,
I want to stay here
Danny,
with you.
Danny.
I want you.
Danny, this isn't the way it should be.
Why? Why not? Why not? Why
Danny,
don't you,
you're not
bud?
yourself.
Why don't you?
Danny, where's your
Why
pride?
don't you? My pride! My pride! I don't want my pride!
Stop it, Deanie! Stop!
Oh, go on. I haven't any pride! I haven't any pride!
Oh, God, Deanie.
This sort of starts off a string of associations for Warren Beatty. And once again, I think Beatty is great in Splendor in the Grass. I think what you're going to see after this, and maybe this is where we should bring in the conversation about star versus actor. I think this movie fully cements him as a movie star, and therefore he doesn't have to work as hard at being an actor after this.
Right. Well, unfortunately, he's just so fucking attractive.
Yes, that's literally it.
The body, the face, the hair, the smolder. Like, he doesn't have to do a lot.
Right. And so, after working with Kazan, he starts this association with like a string of high class directors that like were household names. Eventually, during the Kennedy Center honors for Kazan, tells him that he gave him the most important break in his career.
The wonderful advantage that I had with Kazan is that he did my first picture, so that my training in movies came from Kazan. My training, the disciplines came from Kazan.
These two people could not have been more dissimilar. Peter Biskind, in his book about Warren Beatty, said it was mentor versus protege, director versus actor, immigrant outsider versus native son. Kazan was armed with the confidence born of age and success, while Beatty was virtually aflame with the arrogance of youth. And I think that's really what happens post this movie. He wins that award for Best New Star off his very first film. He's just burning bright. And so he immediately wants to work with the best people that he can possibly work with and put out the movies that he thinks are going to make the most money and keep his name on people's lips. But I think the next string of movies, not a lot of them are great.
It's a Colin Farrell story a little bit, right? Like,
that's a good comparison.
Colin Farrell never became Warren Beatty in terms of like movie star, right? But I think there's a corollary, right, where it's like, oh my God, who is this guy? This movie's great. Let's remember, Elia Kazan at this point, sullied though his reputation was because of,
naming names to the House Un-American Activities.
He was a genius, right? And he had already made, right, On the Waterfront and some other, literal masterpieces, right? East of Eden and whatnot. Kazan is the guy who directs James Dean. And one thing watching and rewatching these Beatty performances that I was reminded of is how much all the young men were clearly being told / trying to just do their version of James Dean.
Absolutely.
And you can see, because we just did Paul Newman on the B-side, in a lot of these movies, because you're so right, Gavin, like literally the next 6 movies, right?
Yeah.
Like they fail, basically, right? None of them are very good. And he's clearly searching for that next thing and maybe not searching hard enough, right? In some cases, like you're kind of saying. And I literally wrote my notes like he's searching for Clyde Barrow. Like you can tell he doesn't want to be like Francho Tone or like an Elvis Presley at the time or like just a handsome piece of meat. He's clearly trying to subvert it, but the movies, they don't work. Some of them are like actively fighting against that. And I think once he gets to Bonnie and Clyde, he figures it out.
I didn't watch every one of these in this little time chunk. I think I saw Lilith, which, has a little bit of edge to it, but is mostly just psychotic.
And probably the most respected of these, I'd say.
I was just going to say one of the better ones out of them.
Yeah. Robert Rosson's second to last movie, who is a good kind of underrated filmmaker. He did The Hustler and,
and if we're going to talk about it, I mean, there's 2 films beforehand, but if we're jumping right to Lilith, I do want to say there's palpable evidence that Warren Beatty helped lead to Robert Rosson's death. So,
yes. I read that.
Yeah, so like the stress that he put on this man.
Sorry, it was his last film. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I misspoke. Yeah.
The stress he put on this poor man. Real quick, I love the point you made up about searching for Clyde Barrow, because I do think it's very clear, especially in the Tennessee Williams, The Roman Spring and Mrs. Stone, where he's playing kind of a bad guy. All Fall Down, where he's playing a truly bad guy. And I do want to come back to those. But but Lilith specifically, where he's playing kind of a not good guy, but like torn about the
tortured,
searching. Yeah.
And because of this, and because of his lack of confidence of his performance, he was doing things like cutting his own lines from the script.
But you can tell in Lilith.
You can tell, like
it's insane. I don't think I've really seen. Yeah, there's not many movies I've seen like that where he's the lead and there are sequences where you're like, oh, so Gene Seberg's just gonna like keep talking, I guess. Like, and thank God she's great in it, but it's just funny. It's like, anyway.
I had never seen her out of a French film.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed by her because she does a lot of heavy lifting in Lilith. Lilith, which is a film about psychology and psychosis, and she's really going through it for most of it. And he's sort of manipulating that situation.
He's like a man coming back from war who like,
He's like a vet.
He's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I just want to like hang out, and like, I never had a job before, but maybe I can like, I don't know, hang out with these patients.
Isn't it funny? A nice thing about watching movies from the past is they're time machines, right? Like when you watch movies, even if they're not great, they are time machines because even if they're fiction, you're getting a glimpse of what it was like in some capacity. And I think with the Lilith, what's funny is it does highlight like the complete lack of respect that like psychoanalysis got in 64, where like in that movie, nobody thinks twice about like, oh, here's a vet who's clearly tortured coming back. Yeah, we'll let him just like be an orderly at this like you know, at this like sanitarium. Like it'll be fine. Oh yeah, you're hanging out with Lilith. None of us want to deal with her. So yeah, you go ahead and just deal with the most complicated patient we have, a guy who walked in off the street 4 days ago. It's like,
and like they're like the hottest people like anyone's ever seen. It's like, yeah, guys, like hang out by yourselves, see what happens.
Do you feel she's trying to seduce you?
Well, it's not that simple. Well, you could call it that, but it's not. It's not just a physical thing. It's much more than that. I'm not sure what it is that she's trying to offer. It's almost like she wants to share this magic little world of hers. And I don't know. Does that all sound strange to you?
No, it doesn't sound strange. It isn't unknown, for patients to seduce personnel and vice versa, unfortunately.
Real quick, 61, Roman Springer, Mrs. Stone, previously mentioned. He plays a male sex worker, if you will. He's so bad in this movie.
It's one of the worst performances I've ever seen an actor give.
He gives, he's 100% Gaga Italian accent. Like,
but it's such a discredit to Stephanie, to
your good friend Stephanie,
to Steph, to NYU Steph, to even say that though, because Gaga has a handle on it, at least, like in some capacity. Whatever Warren's doing, God bless him in this one, it's not working. Yeah.
Do you know she is so famous that she has to wear dark glasses so that people won't recognize her? Last night, Signora Stone.
And then 1962's All Fall Down, directed by John Frankenheimer. Once again, another really famous director.
Yeah.
And he plays the troubled son of Angela Lansbury and Carl Malden, who his younger brother idolizes him, and his younger brother gets involved with an older woman, Eva Marie Saint, who's just gorgeous in everything that she does. And then Warren Beatty sort of seduces her, and tragedy befalls from there. That movie reminded me of the stuff that we invariably end up talking about when we talk about Adam Sandler movies on this show, which usually are about, you have to learn a lesson of like, oh, here's a terrible person, but wait, you're the terrible person for judging them. And so when you get to the end of All Fall Down, it's sort of like, audience, he's a pathetic person and you were maybe bad for looking up to him. And it's like, we weren't looking up to him. We were never on his side.
I wrote in my Letterboxd review, the balls on the last 10 seconds of the score and the final two shots of that movie are like the gumption of, you're like, okay, no, that is not what this movie was. No.
In 1964, you get Promise Her Anything with Leslie Caron, which is this sort of sex comedy.
One after the other, right? Promise Her Anything and Mickey 1, right? What you see, I think, is, and I guess Kaleidoscope too, but more Mickey 1 and Promise Her Anything. What you're seeing is the French New Wave.
Yes.
Like infecting
It's
like
it's creeping
Hollywood,
in, but it's not like taking over quite yet. You know,
Hollywood's trying to figure out how to incorporate like the Godard, Breathless, Agnes Varda thing into like their movies, and they're not doing a good job. Like Mickey 1 is literally like Arthur Penn trying to do Breathless with Warren Beatty and it not working, and they both admitted it basically. You know,
and it's so funny to watch them then like
figure it out,
crack the code for Bonnie and Clyde. But we'll get there in just a second. But I will say once again, this is another example of Promise or Anything is an Arthur Hiller movie. Right. Mickey 1's an Arthur Penn movie. Once again, famous directors who are known for making movies that make money and are, this is his career path. And part of it is, I think, he is a bankable star. He's very attractive, as we've said. But I also think it's that old adage of like, if you want to succeed, find the smartest person in the room and stand next to them. And I think that's what he's doing is he's like gleaming what he can off of these people, sometimes sending them to an early grave like Robert Rossen, but he's like pulling this information from them because he's going to use it. And he does eventually use it to gangbusters appeal,
who perfected this move, like 30 years later, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
Totally.
And then Kaleidoscope in 1966 with Susanna York, who you've had some strong words about, Dan Mecca.
Well, I texted you. I texted Gavin. What did I text you? I was like, Susanna York, not a great actress. God bless.
Yes.
Look, I think I wrote for this one in my little letterbox. This is like his Bond movie, right?
This is his Bond movie. This is charade. This is them trying charade. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like there are moments. I rewatched this knowing it wasn't great, but I was even still disappointed. I kind of thought he was even a little bit better. It really runs out of steam big time the last 40 minutes.
Yes, and they do
just
drag.
It's just a poker scene, which is that's such a gambit.
It's not even poker. It's baccarat.
It's baccarat, yeah, exactly. It's tough. Yeah. He's trying to figure out how to subvert his own stardom, and then Bonnie and Clyde is where it happens. And he kind of never looks back. He kind of never looks back after that.
Speaking of Bonnie and Clyde, so you would expect after a string of 6 movies that are not that well received, but still kind of make bank, kind of keep your name in the lights. Warren Beatty must be like, 45 at this point?
No,
he's 29. And so he ends up producing and acting in Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde has maybe one of the most storied productions of, there's books about it. You can go read Pictures of the Revolution, which does a really good job at recounting the making of this. And yeah, there's so much to say about Bonnie and Clyde that we would need an entire episode of its own.
It launches like 17 careers, it's like
it changes Hollywood.
How did we get from, these 6 kind of like middling movies? I know in 65 he starts his production company. Is he just like, I'm done with this shit, like I need to find what's right for me? And then also was like, and now I'm a producer. Fuck it.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. Yeah.
And as we said, he shows up on these sets. He annoys these people. He's like, you're going to like me this way. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to read these lines. I'm going to, I'll enter from here. This is the costume I'm wearing. So he's already producing, technically. He's just being a dick about it.
He's not getting credited, right?
So now he has the title, and so he can pull that shit, and it makes sense.
Yeah, and he made Arthur Penn crazy on this movie, right? I think, Penn was a more traditional filmmaker, who had an artsy streak, right? Famously, the pretty great movie, The Train, Burt Lancaster fired Arthur Penn because he was focusing too much on the art, right? And Lancaster was like, we're making an action picture, get me John Frankenheimer. And Frankenheimer directed The Train, and The Train's a great action movie, so it worked. But Penn was a Hollywood guy, but had a streak in him that, gets you Mickey 1, right? And like you said, Gavin, like they figure it out here, but not without going to war, right? Like on the set and with everybody. Robert Benton, who made some great movies after this, it's co-writer, is a co-writer on this. And
and Beatty, always has an ear or eye on what's coming next. So he tried to get Godard involved in this. He tried to get Truffaut involved in this. Like, he was going after the masters of the French New Wave to try and get their input. Unfortunately, like, they either didn't have the time or were not interested, or their changes were just kind of like, actually, we don't need to do this. But, you know, the very famous story about him going and telling Jack Warner how he wanted to make this movie, and Jack Warner was like, great, make whatever you want as long as it's in black and white. And he's like, no. And Jack Warner was like, look out the window at the water tower. My name is the first letter on there. Warner, this is my company. And Warren Beatty famously, supposedly, maybe apocryphal, but it sounds great, looked out the window and goes, yeah, but those are my initials.
Wow. Okay.
That's great. I love that.
I would have been like, okay, what? That's so stupid. Like,
now, let me just say, because you mentioned it earlier, Gavin, the book I've read about Beatty, which I do love in all of its gossipy glory, is the Biskin book.
Yeah.
Star.
And like, listen, I like Biskin. I used him highly as a reference during the Audrey Hepburn episode. So like,
Beatty approved and then disavowed, right? Like, that's the funny thing with Star came out in like 2010 or something, and it was like Beatty had approved it, but like ended up not giving Biskin anything. And then like when it came out, he's like, this book, no, ignore it. It's so funny. Classic Beatty move. I love it.
What is there to say about Bonnie and Clyde? I mean, he's really in control. You know, he gets the writers, he casts the movie, he picks Faye Dunaway. Originally, he was just going to produce it, and they wanted Shirley MacLaine as Bonnie. And then when he was going to star as Clyde, they were like, we can't do that.
Right.
Yeah. So many women turned down this role. Faye Dunaway has said that she basically got this role by the skin of her teeth. But like, he cast Gene Wilder in the film. He had worked with Gene Hackman
and Lilith, yeah.
And Lilith. So like he's pulling together, it's literally like magic, you know. He's pulling from all the assets that he's gathered and putting them in the correct order that make this thing that is brilliant.
And he does what he'll do again with Reds, which is he takes a true story and he takes the parts he wants and leaves the rest behind, and he like prints the legend, right? He literally remakes the historical figure in his image, right? Like,
absolutely.
To the point I was making earlier about finding his style as a movie star, I think the word I kept coming back to, trying to think of how you define the thing about Beatty, what is the thing? I think the word is disarming, right? I think the thing about Beatty is and in his review of Dollars, Roger Ebert pointed this out. He's got a con man's charm, which I think speaks to the word disarming, which is like in Bonnie and Clyde, when you first meet him and they're going on their kind of little rampage in the beginning, he is smooth. And then as the movie continues, right, his impotence, right, his lack of confidence, his awareness of the impending doom that's coming, right? Like you get a little Lady Macbeth thing, right, from Faye Dunaway, who's also great. Like that, all of the cracks that make up Clyde Barrow become the thing he leans on when he's John Reed, when he's Joe Pendleton, when he's Bugsy Siegel, right? Like he leans on those cracks, right? And it's like in the movies, even in Mickey 1, whatever. It's like they just aren't there in the same way,
She's nothing but a dumb, stupid backcountry.
Now you look.
She ain't got a brain in her head.
What makes you any better? What makes you so damn special? You was just a West Dallas waitress and spent half your time picking up truck drivers?
Oh, big Clyde Barrow! You're just like your brother. Ignorant, uneducated hillbilly. Listen, the only special thing about you is your peculiar ideas about lovemaking, which is no lovemaking at all.
Right. He's like pushing on the like pressure points of these characters. And I think, because like Clyde is this like myth, right? He is this like hero, Robin Hood. And so in everyone's mind, it's like, yeah, he's this like manly man. He's tough. He's smooth. He's the original smooth criminal. But then for Warren Beatty to lean so hard on the, guess what? He like is not really that like a big sex Lothario guy.
Right.
He doesn't have that, you know, sexual confidence, and kind of putting that front and center for him. I think it's so smart, just like subverting it, and he's able to. It just gives layers, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, Warren Beatty has layers. What the fuck? Weird.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, and that's one of the big changes that it went through. And like you said, Dan, it is really printing a myth or adding on to a myth, creating a new myth. And because like the other writers, they wanted to make Clive Barrow bisexual, which there might be some evidence of that happening in real life. There might also be some evidence of it not happening because he might have actually been victim of sexual assault in prison, which sounds really tragic. And but they wanted to have this big bisexual thing where, you know, he was constantly having three-ways with, and Warren Beatty eventually was like, why don't we just make him impotent? Like, why don't we just go with that? And I think it is such a smart move, because it does, as you were just saying, Louis, like it undermines the expectations of the audience.
So this movie comes out, initially doesn't do great, but there's a grassroots movement that makes it a hit, right?
Yeah.
That speaks to kind of its like immediate cult status, you know, not cult because it's a hit, but like, you know, not unlike something like Diner, right? You know, or something like that, or Brazil, right? You know, where it's like it has these champions who come out of the woodwork and like really like, you know, raise it to become a hit. It's a little Fight Clubby, where the reaction to it and a misunderstanding of the mythos is a little pervasive, right? Where I think you get people honoring Bonnie and Clyde in a way that obviously the subversion that's very apparent in the movie is kind of ignored by some people, which I find funny. And, you know, you think about Fight Club and other movies like that, it's like obviously the same story sung a different way, but it's like, it's great. It's very provocative at the time. It, you know, blew people's hair back. It's still amazingly effective, you know.
Yeah. That last scene is tense.
Yeah,
even now. God, it's amazing.
Yeah, even now.
Yeah, it becomes a huge hit. They don't even want to release it at first. They put it out at drive-ins. Finally, Beatty convinces them to show it at the Montreal Film Festival, I believe. And then from there, the steam engine starts to roll. It gets nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor, and 7 Golden Globe Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor. Beatty was originally entitled to 40% of the profits because they didn't think it was going to make any money. He ends up giving away 10% of that to Arthur Penn to convince Arthur Penn to make the movie. His 30% share nets him $6 million.
Back in 1969?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, which 67, which at the time was unheard of, right? I mean, he's yet another example, like you were saying, Gavin, of his forward thinking, right? People always think of the original Batman, and Jack Nicholson made that deal, right? And he made a bazillion dollars. But, you know, Beatty did it, and look, they're best friends. Like
I was going to say, they're friends, so I'm sure it didn't.
Yeah, so I'm sure Nicholson got good advice from Warren on that one. But like, yeah, I mean, this is the end of the studio system, right? Where you're signing contracts for 5 pictures, and they're whatever 5 pictures they want you to make, right?
Yeah.
That is ending now. And, you know, an actor taking the back end instead of an upfront salary, right, is very revolutionary at the time, for sure.
And this movie ushers in, you know, what is quote unquote the new Hollywood.
New Hollywood, yeah.
And so you're getting these like leaner, more artistic films, but they're hitting the mainstream. And unfortunately, like New Hollywood blows up because they stop being lean. But it's an interesting thing to see that like his forethought, his hand helped guide, you know, Hollywood into a completely new direction and into a way of seeing films in the US specifically, you know, very different. There's lots of people that wouldn't have careers that, you know, he goes on to do McCabe and Mrs. Miller in 1971 with Robert Altman. Robert Altman wouldn't really have the career that he has without Warren Beatty, and because of these advances. And so he historically is such an interesting figure for a guy I think is not one of my favorite performers.
Yeah, like we said, the rest of his career, I think, is defined by the decisions he makes on this movie, you know, and I think he'll run into plenty of failure and we'll get there, but the run he's about to have, give or take a Liz Taylor movie or two, is and I love Liz. That's no knock on Liz, all right? But is unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable.
That's a good place to get us into 1970s, The Only Game in Town, a movie with him and Liz Taylor.
That was remade. That was remade and also remade into a flop. Did you know that?
No, I did not. I couldn't do more research on it after watching it.
The Only Game in Town was remade by Curtis Hanson and written by Eric Roth, and it starred Drew Barrymore and Eric Bana, and it's called Lucky You.
Shut up.
Is a remake of The Only Game in Town. Yep.
Wow.
And I've seen them both. I have now seen them both,
guys. The duology?
I've seen the Lucky Me for seeing them both.
Yeah, I'm gonna need the that's like a double feature night.
Lucky You is a little bit better. I'll say that.
Well, it's Warren Beatty falling in love with Liz Taylor, and they could not be more disalike. And she, they're both very testy, and I mean, I kind of glazed over after a little bit. They're both really not great in this movie, but
okay, that's interesting you said that. Okay,
I think she's better by margin.
I was gonna say this. So this movie, there's nothing really to say about this movie, but this was, I think I texted you this too, Gavin, right? This was the movie when I was watching, because there were like 4 of these, I think there were 4 of these movies I hadn't seen. I'm a big Warren Beatty fan. I've seen most of these movies, but there were 4 I hadn't seen, and one of them was The Only Game in Town. And when I was watching this movie, I realized, he is not a great actor, actually. Like, his range is, maybe I knew this already, but his range is limited.
Yeah.
And Liz Taylor never got enough credit, and she is a great actor.
Yeah.
And even at her later stage in her career, and she was a big diva, and she really kind of forced the production's hand in this movie. This ended up being the great George Stevens' last movie. It was the 3rd movie Liz Taylor and George Stevens made together. And what's so crazy is the first 2 are masterpieces. A Place in the Sun and Giant are 2 of the best movies you'll ever see. And then the 3rd movie is The Only Game in Town. It's like the weirdest. But she forced the production to basically move to London because that's where Richard Burton was making his movie, and she did a lot of diva things. That being said, I think she's good in the movie, and watching her scenes with Beatty is so revealing because you're like, wow, she is probably given like a 6 out of 10, and she's wiping the floor with Warren right now. It's like kind of wild.
Well, what? Do I stay or do I go?
I couldn't care less.
That's a lie.
Well, you just go through that door and see if I try and stop you.
You wouldn't try to stop me, but that doesn't mean you don't care.
What are you, a psychiatrist?
I don't have to be a psychiatrist to know you're just as hard up as I am, or lonely.
I don't like that kind of talk.
After that, he does the aforementioned McCabe and Mrs. Miller in 71 for Robert Altman, a movie I truly and deeply love. Also, is the first time that he is paired with Julie Christie. Did either of you see McCabe and Mrs. Miller? It's long.
Oh, it's the best. Yeah, it's
amazing. So good.
McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which, like you said, there's so many of these movies we could go on and on forever about. So, but suffice it to say, this is Altman, early Altman. He just made MASH. MASH was a huge hit. So he gets carte blanche for a long time to kind of do whatever he wants, which is so crazy. And McCabe and Mrs. Miller is famous because they had to invent new ways to shoot and record, to shoot film and record sound. They invent lenses for it. The onset sound's a nightmare. It's hard to understand the movie if you watch it, right? It's like it really feels like they're in the wilderness in the time that the movie is set. Vilmos Zsigmond shot it. They kind of invented new glass to capture low light scenarios and not really force a lot of light into scenes, which is if you're listening, Robert Altman, his whole thing was this type of thing, right? Where he would
love my favorite director. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. He would push the limits of these things where the cross talk, right, on the mics, where if you watch the movie, right, Mrs. Miller, Julie Christie saying something, right, McCabe will rebut her and step on her line, and it's hard to understand it, but that's the point of the movie, right? And similar to Bonnie and Clyde, McCabe is introduced as a proto-masculine hero, and then every moment in the movie subverts that, right? Where Miller is the one who's kind of running shit, and McCabe's like a coward, right? And once again, these are when Beatty has the most success, right? When he's like, let me act like I'm going to be Han Solo, and instead I will be not that, right? Like that's the whole thing. Yeah.
Excuse me, you know I already got a whorehouse operating.
Ah, you can't call them crib cows, whores. I'm talking about a proper sporting house with class girls and clean linen and proper hygiene.
Well, I don't think you're going to find my clientele up here too interested in that sort of thing.
They will be once they get a taste of it.
71, he does Dollars, and this is also speaking of first-time pairings, it's the first time he's paired with Goldie Hawn. Yeah. This is a crime comedy directed by Richard Brooks. It's very of its time. Well, I mean, it feels very of the last, 4 or 5 years before its time. Like, it's like a swinging 60s picture that somehow is 71.
Right. I watching this movie, I was just like, is Warren Beatty funny? Yes or no?
It depends.
It really depends. You know, like sometimes I'm like, yeah, this is cool. The other time, he's got these modes, and I think Dan, to your point, like he does have his limits.
So here's what I think. I'm no comedian. My wife is the funny one here, but
I thought you were going to say my wife will tell you that.
I think he's funny reacting to things. I think when he's meant to deliver the jokes, he's not very funny, right? I think like, and we'll get to I think we'll get to Ishtar, but I think I probably like Ishtar more than both of you guys, but I think that's why Ishtar.
Yeah, you like Ishtar more than most people.
I do. I think that's why Ishtar does work actually, but like McCabe is a good example of that. His reactions in McCabe are funny, you know? And I think when he's doing that, he's funny. But like in Dollars, which I do like Dollars, kind of reminded me of Ocean's 12 a little bit. Like,
that's high praise for a movie that doesn't deserve it.
I was gonna say,
which one?
You're giving Ocean's 12 to Dollars?
Yeah,
but which one's bad in this scenario?
Ocean's 12 is good. It's a good weird. It's a good weird sidebar in the Ocean's trilogy.
I love Ocean's 12. Yeah, no, Ocean's 12 is a better movie. I just mean the energies are similar. The energies are similar.
That's the vibe for sure. I don't know that it necessarily
achieves it. I agree.
Right.
No, I agree. Goldie Hawn, though, we can agree, I think kind of is a spark.
Rocket.
She's so great.
I mean, this is the year after Cactus Flower, right? She's
which I love.
The hottest thing this side of fucking soup. You know, it's like
Cactus Flower, not a great movie. Solid performances all around.
Oh my god, amazing performance. Yeah.
In 72, Beatty basically creates the political benefit concert for George McGovern. He gets Barbra Streisand, Carole King, James Taylor to perform. Barbra Streisand brings Quincy Jones and his orchestra. They record an entire album. He's really like mobilizing Hollywood and celebrities towards a political cause, which really hasn't been seen yet. I mean, obviously celebrities had political opinions, but he's like really putting it on the line for progressive opinions.
And as we know, it totally works. McGovern became president. Everything was fine.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, I love that Warren Beatty is like, listen, I've got $6 million and I want Democrats in office. Let's make it happen.
I mean, he's a control freak.
Yes. Yes.
So 74, he appears in The Parallax View, directed by Alan Pakula. I love saying Alan Pakula's name. And yeah, The Parallax View is a good little thriller. I enjoyed watching it. I didn't think about it till the end of it and was like, oh, that was kind of dumb. but I think it's a fun movie.
Yeah, the second in Pakula's Paranoia trilogy, right?
Yes.
Pretty famous. Clute, Parallax, and All the President's Men.
Which is funny because
the third best, right? The third best.
Yeah,
of the
I was
three.
just gonna say because those other two are like masterpieces.
Bangers.
And yeah, Parallax View is a film about a journalist who uncovers a plot of an organization that essentially assassinates political figures for money and then covers it up. And Warren Beatty plays the journalist who gets embroiled in that. And the part that killed it for me, and once again, fun movie, totally fun. Don't want to say too much about it, but he goes to like infiltrate the company at one point, and I was like, does this asshole not think that these people don't know what he looks like? Like, they have all this money to hire these people to cover shit up. He thinks that they don't know what a camera is.
I do agree with you, Gavin, on that, I have to say. You know, like you're talking about his politics, Beatty becomes fully political here, and he's always pushing for it, right? If memory serves, he's pushing for these things in Parallax. And then onward, right? Like everything he does basically through to the end of his life, you know, a love affair aside, right, is like very political, you know, even like Heaven Can Wait, right? I mean, there's political elements to basically everything he does.
Yeah.
The next film he does is 1975's The Fortune for Mike Nichols. I don't know how much.
Oh, maybe not The Fortune. Maybe there's no politics in The Fortune.
I mean, it's just not a great movie altogether.
It's not. Carol Eastman, which is a shame because she wrote one of my favorite movies ever, Five Easy Pieces.
I will say, in defense of Carol Eastman,
they threw her script out basically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. She handed in like a 230-page script, and the movie's like 93 minutes. So I can just see him like tearing pages, like Mike Nichols just tearing. It's because he wanted a different movie. He wanted a slapstick comedy, and she was writing something that had more beef to it. And also, like, I just don't think, for as good of friends as him and Jack Nicholson are, I just don't think they ever play those characters correctly. You know, Jack Nicholson.
You guys didn't like this?
No.
Did you like it, Louis? You liked it?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I want to hear about it.
So I think first of all, Stockard Channing, hello.
Yeah,
she
first movie.
She is incredible.
I love that we both rush in to defend Stockard Channing.
Channing, my queen. Rizzo herself is amazing.
Love her.
Yeah. And it was wild. I was like, as the song starts and the movie starts, and I was like, is that Stockard herself singing? And Derek walked by and I was like, babe, is that Stockard? And he was like, oh, absolutely. I was like, what a fucking icon, singing her own songs in the movie. Yeah, I thought that perhaps Warren Beatty is funny when he's playing the straight guy, and you have like a full psychopath like Jack Nicholson who is like bouncing off the wall, and like his whole shtick in this movie is that like he's lazy, kind of dumb, is just kind of like along for the ride, right?
You mean Nicholson? Yeah,
right, Nicholson. Yeah, and Beatty is the one who is like the big thinker, the one who has the plan, and it's all kind of going to like shit. Yeah, I don't know. I was tickled by her. You know, like it was just antics, and I wasn't mad at it.
Are you trying to be suave?
If you think I'm trying to copy you, you're bent.
No? Who had it first?
What, were you born with a mustache or something? A lot of people have
kiddos, please. Are we gonna have a good time or not? I know. Let's all sing something. Let's sing, Shaking the Blues Away. Unhappy news away.
I mean this exact style.
Hey, I've run into a dozen people out here that have this exact style.
They may you name them. But as a rule, they'll go if you shake it
Gilbert,
away.
for instance.
Do like
Navarro.
Who? 75, he does Shampoo, which he also co-wrote and produces. It's directed by Hal Ashby. It's nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Original Screenplay, as well as 5 Golden Globe Awards, including Best Motion Picture and Best Actor. He plays a horny hairdresser, and I mean that's literally the logline. That's how I knew what this movie was when I was a kid. My mom was like, "Oh yeah, there's the movie where Warren Beatty plays a hairdresser who sleeps with all of his clients," and which is maybe a little unfair because he only seems to sleep with like 4 or 5.
No, he fully says in the movie. When they ask him, he's like, how many? And he's like, all of them. What do you mean? Like,
so you got Julie Christie, Goldie Hawn, and the great Lee Grant are like the 3 women in his life. Yeah.
I love Lee Grant.
Lee Grant, what an icon. I love her.
Also, like, to most audiences don't know that this is kind of a period piece, and especially because they advertised the movie with Julie Christie, Goldie Hawn, and Warren Beatty in their, like, 1975 appearance when the movie actually takes place in the 60s. I think I don't love this movie, but I think he's very good in it, and I think politically it's much more interesting. I think this is a much better window actually into the like a time and place than it was like an entertaining movie for me.
Yeah, I totally agree because I was like, oh, it's so interesting. We're getting some of like the Nixon background, LBJ stuff going on. And there's that moment where Jack Warden, he's like, they're all jerks. It doesn't fucking matter, you know, like and talking about like the presidents and the people in charge. And I was just like, wow, you know, I'm glad you brought the political stuff up earlier because, you know, going through his career, like I feel like maybe Bulworth is like, I don't know, the zenith of all this, where it's just like, this all fucking sucks. We're all fucked. We're all doomed. Everyone in charge is a piece of shit. And so like, why not just fuck all your clients, you know? And he's just having the conversation with Jack Ward, and it's like, yeah, women fucking like just hate us. The jig is up, babe. Like, and it's not like this big macho thing. It's not like, I can't believe you were fucking the girl, because it's kind of like this movie to me is like this primal scream for like liberation. You know, it's just like, we all want to be loved. We all want, you know, to feel good. And I think it's kind of just like living in this world where like the world is on fire and we just are trying to like make it. He just wants to open up his stupid fucking like salon and, you know, be quote the nice guy. He's a fuckboy.
But in a way it almost is, you know, it's come back around in terms of its importance then like in our society. Because I thought going in, I was like, this is going to be kind of frivolous. And like I said, I don't love it all together. Like, I don't think it all clicks together in like a full puzzle, you know, you don't get the full picture ever at any point. But the mood and the feeling and that peak, I think you're 100% on.
Yeah,
I
think
agree with that.
It's the first time you see him really taking charge of a movie. Like, so Hal Ashby directed it, but by all accounts, Beatty really co-directed it. And
it certainly doesn't feel like a Hal Ashby movie.
It doesn't. It does not. And, you know, Hal Ashby's, you know, the great Hal Ashby. But I think certainly, you know, Beatty and Robert Towne, who wrote the screenplay, were very good friends. And I think, you know, Beatty gets co-writing credit on this, which I think is his first writing credit. So it's like there's a lot happening here where he really forms the movie around his persona. And I feel like this has to be the most honest look at how probably he felt about his own persona, right? Because even by now he's developed at least in the Hollywood world, is this kind of like living Lothario, you know, man about town. And I think,
he's definitely playing into the character.
And the most beautiful thing about the movie, and you know, I feel like if you can elicit this in your performance, is like he's stressed the whole time, right? And and what's funny is people say horny hairdresser, blah blah blah, and it like feels kind of carefree in that way. And it reminds me of the way people think about The Big Lebowski, where like the culture around The Big Lebowski is like, oh, he's just the dude. But if you watch The Big Lebowski, the dude is really stressed the whole movie, and everything is collapsing in on him, not unlike Shampoo. And so the beauty of the performances is like they are acting one way, like to those who are, you know, getting their hair done, or like when he's bowling, if you're talking about, you know, Big Lebowski, but actually they're really struggling, you know what I mean? And I think it's definitely one of Beatty's like top 3 best performances. He's so good in this movie.
He's very good.
It's iconic. Yeah, it really is great.
Best hair performance for sure.
Oh my God, by a mile. And like, I don't know, Goldie Hawn, like, has anyone looked more beautiful in a movie? Like, it would be hard. It would be
and she's
hard to
so
think
good
about.
too.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one of the things that, once again, not to get off on a rant, but like, you have Julie Christie in this movie, who is considered like this amazing actor. And I think people look at Goldie Hawn and they're like, yeah, she's just a comedy actor. She's so good in this movie. She holds really her own. Yeah.
Young Carrie Fisher, 2 good scenes.
Well, it is life in Beverly Hills on a certain level. And of course, the people in this particular picture are rather trivial people, and rather they're I don't know whether I should call them trivial people. The focus of their lives seems to be on things that one might call trivial.
I do want to get to Heaven Can Wait, 1978. It's his first co-directing credit with Buck Henry. It's nominated for 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Adapted Screenplay. He's getting the attention he deserves, but once again, it only comes when he is in complete control of these things.
Well, do you know this? You know the stat, right, Gavin? This crazy thing with Beatty.
Oh, please! I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I do.
Okay, so Heaven Can Wait, and then Reds is 3 years later. Okay, he's the only person to have been nominated for acting, directing, writing, and producing the same film, and he did it twice.
Wow.
Because Evan Can Wait, he gets nominated for all 4, and 3 years later, he does it again for Reds. That's like insane. And he's the only one, and he's done it twice.
That is insane.
1981, he does Reds, the historical epic about the American communist journalist John Reed, who observed the Russian October Revolution. Beatty had been working on this since 1970, so it's an 11-year process to get this done. It ends up being a critical and commercial success, even though it is so long.
I was going to say, emphasis on epic.
Yeah, I mean, it's an American film about an American communist released during the Cold War, so it seems like this shouldn't work, but it does. It gets 12 Academy Award nominations, including 4 for Beatty for Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Original Screenplay. Beatty ends up winning for Best Director. Maureen Stapleton wins for Best Supporting Actress for playing Emma Goldman, and Vittorio Sotaro wins for Best Cinematography. It received 7 Golden Globe nominations, including Best Motion Picture, Director, Actor, and Screenplay, and Beatty wins the Golden Globe for Best Director. We mentioned Reds in our Diane Keaton episode. I gave my 5-star review for Diane Keaton's performance in it. I really think she's amazing in it. I think Warren Beatty's very good in this too, so I'm not downplaying him, but he really lets her shine. I mean, there's a full hour of the movie he's not in, and so she has to carry a lot of weight of this film.
Yeah, Keaton's amazing in this. It was going to be Julie Christie, but it was too close to Zhivago, so she said no.
Yeah, I don't blame her for turning it down, but
yeah, I don't blame her.
But Keaton is amazing. And
Keaton, no, I mean,
yeah.
It's a happy. It's not an accident. It's a happy decision ultimately because Keaton is so good in this movie, and you'll always have Dr. Zhivago, for Julie Christie.
And Jack Nicholson is in this movie as well. So good. It couple scenes at most, really amazing in them.
When on Reds, I called Jack and I said, "You got to help me." And he said, "What?" And I said, "You've got to tell me an actor that I can get that everyone will completely believe that he takes Diane Keaton away from me in the picture." And he said, "You have only one choice."
I didn't rewatch it for this episode, but now that I'm thinking, I was like, yeah, what a journey this movie goes on. And it's like the most impressive thing is it sticks to landing. It's the completely, you're kind of like traveling along with Diane and like, oh, look, Jack Nicholson. Oh, it's kind of like this bonkers movie, and like it sticks to landing. It's just like, it's so impressive. It's really a feat.
It's such a bonkers movie. I mean, every time I think of Reds, that's the perfect way to describe it. The fact that Heaven Can Wait was so successful and Beatty was so famous that he was able to get $40 million to make a movie about an American journalist, the only American buried in the Kremlin, right? Who fought for a socialist / eventual communist revolution, right? And wrote the most famous book about it, 10 Days That Shook the World, which I actually read because as we were talking about doing this this episode, I was like, I'm just going to finally read that book. And it's a pretty amazing book. And the fact that he got it made and it came out and got all those nominations is just, it's about communism, right? During the Cold War, made in America by the biggest movie star in the moment.
And it's interesting too, because it doesn't mince words about the fact that it is it is taking down the American system of hunting for communists too, because there's a lot of great scenes in which Diane Keaton has to go up against these panels that question her ability to be both an American and a socialist. And so it's, once again, it's fascinating that it's not exactly it's not even like communism is bad. It's like, I don't know, draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, exactly. It touches on so many, because even if you read 10 Days That Shook the World, at the end of that book, you can feel John Reed writing to the caution he's seeing of the fracturing that ends up happening and bastardizing the whole movement, of course, as we know. And you can feel Reed fearing that in his own prose in his book, right? And so Beatty encapsulates that and much, much more in this epic. And then you have the witnesses, right? The interviews throughout are so beautifully done and so beautifully incorporated. It's great.
Yeah, it feels like, as much as he's not an actor, he is a vehicle for these ideas and these big thoughts. You know, these are big movies. You know, a lot of the movies that are like obviously this one but to come, I would say he's trying to just deliver ideas as opposed to like, here's like a good performance. It feels like there's just more priorities than like, look at my acting. It's more like, here is an idea that I really want us to like think critically about.
Yeah, I mean, like a good producer, you know, like we said. I mean, he a great facilitator of, you know, of work and art, you know. And I think Reds. I mean, to me, Reds is the peak for him. Yeah, I think you know,
it's so good,
and the peak for most filmmakers. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies, you know. So it's quite incredible.
Following Reds, he doesn't work for another 5 years, and that's not to say like he's not doing work, but he's not acting, he's not directing, and he doesn't do another film until 1987's Ishtar, which was written and directed by Elaine May. There has been so many things written and said about Ishtar. Ishtar could be its own episode as well. It's funny that there's so many of these movies that we could talk about like at length for hours. Yeah. But needless to say, Ishtar is a huge disaster. I mean, Beatty and May fight all the time. He tells the studio tries to fire her. He realizes what a bad look that would be, especially because he really championed her making this movie. He wanted her to make a big film.
By all accounts, you know, she saved Heaven Can Wait, right? I mean, he feels he owes her, I think, is part of it too.
Yes, that's absolutely it. Yeah,
you know, and he doesn't want us to be seen as a guy who fires women, which I can't blame him for that. You get it, you know. It's like,
Ishtar, it's not great. I watched it for the first time for this. I don't understand why it has the reputation it has about being like the worst movie ever made. I've seen a lot worse than this.
Well, can I tell you why I think it has a reputation? So I like it a lot. I think it's actually a very underrated, kind of very funny movie. But
yes, and we are sending you to a hospital for that.
But it took me. I've watched it a few times, and I did not always like it. It's obviously it's like a very clear, politically infused take on the road to movies that Bing Crosby and Bob Hope did, which themselves were not great movies. God bless.
No.
Like, it's.
I mean, those movies were literally made to be forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, Ishtar is certainly better and more ambitious than any of those movies. But I'll say this: the thing about Ishtar is, aside from just all of the poison that had already been spouted before the movie even came out, not unlike a John Carter or something like that, where like by the time it comes out, it's already kind of being buried. So that's part of it. But also, the movie is about two singers who aren't good at singing, right? So I think when you do that, the risk you run is it is going to be annoying, right? So the risk you're running is, am I going as a viewer to be too annoyed to even notice that it's funny, right? And I think if you are too annoyed, you're just going to turn on the movie the minute they start singing songs that are bad, right? And if you can't get behind the fact that they're knowingly bad, then you just are going to hate the movie. And I think 95% of the world didn't get behind it, you know, and I think.
Well, it's also like how long were they expecting us to laugh at the joke? The
100%,
joke keeps going on,
100%.
And so it's one thing to be like, oh, these guys are bad, but like I was like, wow, they're having a lot of montages of them being bad, and it's only like, and I bet they were banking on like people love, Warren Beatty and Hoffman, right?
Dustin Hoffman.
Yes. Dustin Hoffman. I was like, people love these guys, like they're gonna laugh with them. But it fully is just like, nope, you overestimated the charm factor, and
and also the gambit they make, which they decide on, obviously, which, you know, Hoffman plays the stud and Beatty plays the idiot, which is so clearly intentionally misleading on purpose, you know.
Which I don't even think Beatty's at his worst here. I think. No,
I love him. I love Beatty. So like, I mean, I think he's great. Yeah.
But anyways, huge disaster. Doesn't go well for anyone.
Bad.
He forms a second production company, Mulholland Productions, and the next movie that he produced, directed, and plays the title role in is 1990's Dick Tracy. This is one of our like crowning achievements. This movie gets name dropped,
Yes.
I think, once a year by us, between our Madonna episode, between our 90s superhero episode. It gets 7 Academy Award nominations and wins 3 of them: Best Art Direction, Best Makeup, Best Original Song. It receives 4 Golden Globe Award nominations, including Best Motion Picture. I famously have gone on record saying I think this movie's boring but beautiful, and I do want to say that I think that he directed it very well. And I've talked about why I think it's boring before, but I can reiterate that point, which is he does a really good job at emulating the Dick Tracy comic strip style, which is all about these 3-panel arcs. And so the movie is so many mini arcs. It's just arc after arc after arc that it never overall arcs, and so you never get to that like satisfactory points because it's starting and stopping constantly, and that's my problem with the film. So I mean, I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I do think it's aged incredibly right in this world of superheroes we live in now.
My God. Yeah.
So I think I give it a lot of benefits of doubts because I think, you know, I look back at Darkman, the original Batman, and Dick Tracy, and I just think to myself, like, we had it all. We had it all, didn't we?
We could have had it all.
Yeah.
Same. Like, I think even though I don't think it's the perfect film, watching it is just a full feast for your eyes.
And Madonna singing Sondheim, it's like, come on.
Oh my! And that song is so good.
Yeah.
Even though you're absolutely right, Gavin. I think just like the breath of fresh after the Marvel DC whatever, which is take it or leave it. It's just so different, and the color. I mean, God, the way it just looks so incredible. It's the commitment to art is just stunning.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
Yeah, well, I mean, and once again, I think that there's nothing that looks like it. There should be more things that look like it, but yeah, I just wish I liked it better. I think he's pretty good at playing the flat sort of stalwart hero, though, and I do think it takes some challenge to do that because it's sort of like a return to the stuff that he was doing, which he was doing badly before, and is actually better at it.
Yeah, way more self-aware. Yeah, this time.
It do take nerve.
It do take nerve. In 91, he produced and starred in the real-life gangster biopic of Bugsy Siegel, just called Bugsy. Directed by Barry Levinson, it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor. It won 2 awards for art direction and costume design. And yeah, I had seen this movie years prior, but none of it was fresh for me. And I just recently rewatched it. I think he's great in this movie. And maybe it's because he didn't have to contend with directing it himself that he's like maybe better than some of the other films that he's in. But I almost wish he had directed this as well too, which is not to say anything bad about Barry Levinson. I think he did a spot on job.
Yeah, I like this movie. I should have tried to rewatch it, but it's kind of a good example of like Beatty still held so much sway that even though this movie kind of underperformed, it still garnered 10 nominations. Like it's like so funny where it's like I like this movie, but it's an interesting, and also don't forget Levinson's coming off of Rain Man, which is like the biggest thing in the world, right? It's like Levinson's at his own peak right now, so it's just kind of a bunch of people near the top of their game working together. Obviously, Annette Bening, her first like big starring role alongside the Grifters the year before, and it's like star-making performance by her. Her introductory scene is probably the most famous part of the movie, right, with the lollipop. Like, it's just very sexy. Yeah, the movie's good. It's epic. Definitely worth a look. Not his best movie in terms of the movie as a whole, but an interesting piece of work for sure.
I hit the Google so fast afterwards. I said, I need to know more about Bugsy and Las Vegas. I like this movie. It's kind of weird. He's being kind of he's got like the little tick about, warming up and, I'm not a big like gangster movie person, but like, I really liked this movie.
I've stayed at the Flamingo. It was fine.
Oh, the Flamingo is kind of
fine.
She's seen better days, is what I'll say.
That's an old lady.
She's seen a lot of better days, but she is the home of Drag Race Live, so
which I've seen.
In '98, he wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the political satire Bulworth. Critically acclaimed. It was nominated for the Academy Awards for Best Original Screenplay. Bulworth, we've talked about it before because we did a Halle Berry episode.
She's good. She's good in it.
Yeah, he's good in it. I think it's another movie that once again feels more. It is both dated and more prescient as time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, his whole rap at the benefit is like you could do it right now, and it'd be like, yep. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, but Bulworth, I think is sort of underrated. I think it's one of those movies that people sort of forgot, and it's sort of treated as a joke. But I think it's worthwhile to go back and watch if you've not seen it in a long time.
Agree. Yeah.
There's a time when every homie got to risk his neck and fight for the thing that he believe in, and he got to preach it right. If he don't got shit to die for, and he's afraid to shed the light, then he ain't got shit to live for, scumbag.
Is that how white people rap?
He also pops up in Madonna Truth or Dare in '91. I do want to mention that because he was dating her at the time. Cool. But
yeah, Madonna broke him.
Yeah.
Madonna embarrassed him so much that he was like, yeah, I got to settle down.
I got to settle down. I'm an old man.
That's hilarious.
I mean, and if you don't believe me, like watch the documentary.
Oh, we have.
I know. I'm just saying, like to the listener, like it's wild. Like I was like rewatching clips. I was like, wow. If I were him, I'd be like, yeah, I gotta relax, I guess.
In 2001, he does the movie Town and Country, which we also talked a brief bit about in our Diane Keaton episode.
That's a movie that exists.
It certainly is.
Joshy Hartnett plays his son.
That's true. That's true. Which is actually, I think, pretty decent casting.
Yeah, agreed.
And yeah, I don't know what to say about Town and Country other than I think the most damning evidence is it's a disaster of Ishtar epic proportions, and yet it's so bad that people remember Ishtar over it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Town and Country is so bad it will never get a reappraisal.
Yeah. In 2005, he sues Tribune Media, claiming that he still owns the rights of Dick Tracy. The judge decides in his favor. And then in 2010, he does something that I've never seen anybody else do before. And it's one of my favorite things.
I love it. Yeah.
He does a Dick Tracy TV special, the Dick Tracy special, which premieres on Turner Classic Movies, in which he sits down with Leonard Maltin and lets Leonard Maltin interview him in character as Dick Tracy.
Incredible.
Just so he could hold on to the rights.
Are you asking me to pick a favorite? I guess I am asking you that. Ralph Byrd, Morgan Conway, Warren Beatty. Well, to be quite fair, Mr. Maltin, I don't know that it's right to pick favorites. I would say, however, that Ralph Byrd did have a wonderful way about him.
And you know who lit that? Emmanuel Lubezki.
Shut the fuck up.
He hired Emmanuel Lubezki, like arguably our greatest living cinematographer, to like light a 2-camera interview with Leonard Maltin. Cinephile game night guest Leonard Maltin.
He must have the biggest dick in Hollywood. That's all.
He better.
And then in 2016, he does Rules Don't Apply. This is the final film that he has made to date. He directed it. He stars in it as I don't think that he's technically the star. He's like he's a supporting character in it. But it is a film about Howard Hughes. It's set in 1950 from 58 to about 64. In Las Vegas. And yeah, it's about Howard Hughes's driver, a young starlet played by Lily Collins, and how this sort of love triangle occurs between the three of them. I just saw this movie. I don't think it's that bad. It's so funny because I've seen the ratings on it like waffle back and forth between like 1 star and 5 stars, and I'm just like, wow, it's fine. It's a fine movie. I see what he was going for with it. It's not my favorite, and I do almost wish he hadn't played Howard Hughes, but that's neither here nor there.
But here's what's important. I think what we learned in that movie is the rules don't apply to him.
Exactly. I mean, 100%. You know, he had been trying to quote unquote make this movie for 40 years. He tried even before Heaven Can Wait. He got Spielberg involved in the 90s, and Spielberg was like, I want Jack Nicholson to play Howard Hughes. And he was like, bye, I'm out. So like, you know, this was clearly a passion project. I just think that like he's too, it's the like Bobby Darin Beyond the Sea situation where it's like, you're just too old to play this part now.
I mean, I will say in defense of the decision, he was 10 years older than John Reed was when he died, when he made Reds, you know,
Right.
like, so he'd been doing it to success before. So you could kind of like, you know, Heaven Can Wait. He plays a football player. He's 40 when he makes it. You know, it's like,
yeah.
I just think he got used to, you know, the guy's got an ego bigger than the state of Texas, right? I think he just was like, fuck it, I'll fucking play I'll play fucking Howard Hughes.
I like that you
Try and
confused Howard
stop
Hughes
me.
with
You're
Warren Beatty.
Beatty. Yeah, you like
briefly.
But it's like, you know, that's the name of the game. You know what I mean? He just was like, what? Who's going to stop me?
But there are things I genuinely like in that movie, and so like I don't think it's a huge waste of time. I don't know. I
like it. I like the movie a lot.
I think people get hyperbolic when they talk about movies in either direction, and I'm always just like, you can acknowledge that something like doesn't suck.
Just fine.
Yeah, just fine. We aforementioned 2017 89th Academy Awards slip up.
Right.
They invited him back the next year alongside Faye Dunaway for the 90th Academy Awards to tell some jokes, and then they announced The Shape of Water as the winner without incident. I do want to.
Who did they not invite back? Barry Jenkins to give a speech, which
that's true.
is still stupid, but okay.
Oh no, that is very stupid.
Yeah.
And personal life, we've mentioned string of women. Supposedly he'd been linked to over 100 female celebrities. Cher once said that he had dated everybody that she knows. Leslie Caron said Warren only dated women that resembled his sister, Shirley MacLaine.
Well, Leslie Caron looks like Shirley MacLaine, so
right. And she at one point said that Warren Beatty called her up in the middle of the night, telling her that he was worried that she wasn't thinking of him because he's a narcissist.
Oh my God.
Famously linked to being the possible subject of Carly Simon's "You're So Vain." So
yeah.
And I believe didn't Simon herself admit that like one verse was inspired by him and another was inspired by Dustin Hoffman, right, or something like that? Like,
yeah. I don't remember if it was Dustin Hoffman. It was certainly, but it was
somebody like that. Yeah,
somebody like that. And there's definitely what's his face, her former writing partner in there as well too.
Jimmy Taylor.
James Taylor. But in 92, he did marry Annette Bening. They've been married since then. Did they meet on the set of Bugsy? I believe
so. I believe so.
Yeah. And I didn't mention earlier, but he did remake Love Affair with her. It's a mess. But
yeah, not strong.
Not strong. And they've had 4 children. The oldest child has since come out as trans in 2012. And so, I mean, he's politically very left. He's been a big supporter of the Democratic Party. In 72, he was part of McGovern's campaign. I guess he was a friend of John McCain, but I don't give a shit about that.
But
I mean, he's he's like, like a lot of these old guard guys, right? Where, they were walking across the aisle, he always intimated he wanted to run for office. He never did, but he was very involved, like you said. And I think, that type of like, oh yeah, me and John are cool, even though he feels this way, kind of just doesn't exist the same way anymore.
Oh wow, he was a pallbearer at his funeral.
Yeah, they were like really good friends. Yeah.
Ugh, geez, Warren, come on. I understand everything you're saying, but like, ugh, let's get over that.
Gavin's like, he's left, but not left enough for me.
Yeah, exactly.
He made a movie about communism, Gavin.
You know what? He could have made 2.
Yes,
anyways,
Red's 2 red for
2 red. I think that wraps up Warren Beatty's career. Let's get into our reviews because I think we have a ton of stuff to talk about. So, I mean, I didn't even get into the unmade projects. There's so many things that we could talk about. He wanted to play Liberace. You know, he wanted to do a sequel to Bulworth called Bulworth 2000. There was so many Dick Tracys he wanted to make, and but I digress. Let's get into our reviews. Let's start with our 1-star reviews and find out the things we didn't like.
Dan, we always like our guests to go first. So what did you think is maybe the worst of the bunch?
All right, so my 1-star for Warren himself. It would I guess Town and Country.
It's a solid pick.
Which I know there, like we already talked about. There are plenty to choose from. God bless Warren. But I just think it's such a mess, and he's such a buffoon in it. And it's like, I think actually, to my point earlier, this actually does back up my point earlier, Lou, when we were talking about him in comedy. Him playing the buffoon, it doesn't work, right? Like, it's actually a living example of what we're talking about. It's like Town and Country. He's this cheating husband, right? Who's like, it's almost like geriatric Shampoo, kind of, where it's like he's juggling all these affairs, but you know, deep down he's a good guy, or trying to be, but he's not. There's no anchor to the movie. Right? Like with Shampoo, the anchor is Beatty, right? It's the politics, it's the economic stresses of the moment, right? And there's nothing like that in Town and Country. It's just a jumbled mess. And like Gary Shandling is trying to like out farce Beatty. And what you get, I think, I do think that's Beatty's worst performance. Even in a world of Roman Spring, I think that's Beatty's worst performance.
If you would just examine yourself and why it is that you need to believe something that would make you pursue a sordid little fishing expedition like this. This is, well, no, I guess you have the temerity, you have the audacity, you have the heartlessness. Without a shadow of a fraction, of a moment, of a scintilla, of a tiny atom of a doubt, to think that I would put our marriage into that kind of jeopardy, that's just fine, Ellie. Oh, that's just fine. 25 years. I would have thought better of you, Ellie, but that's fine. That's fine. Good. Fine. 25 years.
Very good pick. I definitely agree. My pick, I was having a little bit of trouble. I was like, he doesn't register for me all the time. And sometimes I think he's really funny and like he can nail it down. Other times I think he's just like kind of being very like soap opera actor-y. But today I finally saw Ishtar, and I'm not, what seals the deal for me and giving my 1-star review for Ishtar is, I was like, does this man not know how to do like basic accent work? Because holy shit, he's like, I'm from Texas, you know, and it comes and goes in a very aggressive way. And you can just tell like the deep discomfort he has. Like there is not one moment in this movie where I'm like, oh, he's having fun. You know, it feel all of the ease and comfort he has. That kind of like leading man quality it evaporates on this screen. So yeah, that and for also just Ishtar being kind of an enormous swing and a miss.
Yeah,
I have to give it to Ishtar.
It's funny. 2 things. He clearly wasn't having a good time because he made them do over 100 takes of a vulture landing next to him. So like,
God,
yeah,
brutal.
It's the tightest ass on that movie. But I will say that my only thing to add to that is I think Hoffman's even worse in the film. But
yeah, and the thing like to I want to give like it a little bit of credit. Like, you know, I don't think overall I'm like, oh, this is the most offensive or like horrible movie ever. I just think him specifically and Hoffman, you know, like the 2 characters and it's just too big for its britches. I think like the whole idea, like these 2 guys who want to be songwriters and they're going to like go on an adventure, but then like all of a sudden it's a CIA thing and like the Middle East, and it's just too much, you know, because it's one thing to be like, go on an adventure and we're going to Morocco, but then like we're fully having CIA and war and like real time political shit going on, and we have fucking Dustin Hoffman doing like really insensitive, and that's me being kind, like, you know,
you're not wrong.
and so, and also like, I don't know who the fuck they're fooling or thought they were fooling, if like, oh, this girl is a boy, or, you know, like,
It's
And
Isabella Adjani, right? In that movie?
Isabella Adjani. I love her so much, and she hated this movie. Like, I think she refused to do her own ADR. Like, it's
So I said to Willow, I said, look, we got to go to New York or Nashville, because those are the only two places to be if you want to sell songs. Mm-hmm. That's how come we came to New York. Mm-hmm. What a smuck I was.
Schmuck. It's not smuck. It's schmuck.
Smuck.
Schmuck.
Smuck.
Say shh. Shh. Now say muck.
Muck.
Now say shh and muck together real fast.
Smuck.
Closer.
I think you run into a weird thing with that movie because Elaine May's so celebrated, rightfully, but certainly that fourth movie of hers, you know, is a really hard nut to crack. And it ruined her career in a very shitty, you know, misogynistic way forever. And it's like...
Not to make this episode even longer, but they literally create the phrase director jail for her. And she never gets out of it.
No, she has yet to make a feature.
Right. She's made
again.
documentaries, but she's never made another feature film.
It's incredibly sad, yeah.
Well, I'm going to follow that up with nonsense then, because that's all really solid stuff. But and I hate picking a film that's early on in a career, because I know that
do it.
But I'm not even gonna pick the one that you're thinking of. But I truly think he's terrible in the Roman Spring of whatever, and that's nonsense. And also Tennessee Williams apparently said that was his favorite adaptation of any of his stuff.
Stop it.
And I was just like,
is that
Tennessee?
True?
Yes. Yeah.
Holy.
He said it was his favorite
God.
film adaptation of his work.
Really?
Yeah. But I actually have to hand it to 1962's All Fall Down.
Oh yeah, he's bad.
His character Barry Willard, and like I said earlier, he's a psychopath. He's manipulative. The first time you meet him in the movie, he's in jail because he literally scarred a woman in a bar. And this is supposed to be your like kind of redeemable, like, well, not redeemable, but like in the end, you're supposed to feel bad. You're supposed to be like, oh, he's pathetic too. And it's like, no, this man is a monster. And I don't think Beatty is in control of what he's capable of, and it's actually goes back to a point you made much earlier, Dan, which is he's very much in that sort of rebel without a cause mode. He's really pulling that forth, and it never works. I never understood why anyone in this family looks up to him. I never understood Angela Lansbury's like psychotic devotion to him. I never understood why Eva Marie Saint, who has the best name in the film, Echo O'Brien, isn't in love with him, like enough to torpedo her life, essentially. It's just bad. It's not a fun watch. And on top of that, it's 110 minutes. So it just takes forever to get where it's going. And yeah, he's no James Dean.
Why is it you never married anybody?
I guess I'm just backward.
I never made out with anybody?
You know, something tells me not to answer that question.
Why?
Because you might get sore. Am I right?
Well, would that be so terrible if you made me sore?
I'd just rather skip it.
I want to know why.
You know why.
Because you never loved anybody else? You're pregnant, aren't you?
He's no James Dean?
Is there anything else that we think kind of like scrapes the bottom of the barrel? I have to say, I didn't like Dollars. I just learned today that like Dollars is the way you say that movie. Like, what the fuck? It's a dollar sign.
I know. Yeah, Dollars, you said. Go ahead.
I really hated Promise or Anything. I totally got what it was going for. It never worked for me.
I do think Promise or Anything as a movie I really, really disliked. I do think some of his acting with the kid is pretty inspired, actually.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's why I didn't give him my one-star review. He's fine in it.
Yeah.
It's just a bad
The
movie.
movie's not great. The Only Game in Town I didn't like. Mickey 1 is worth watching. It does not work, but it's kind of an interesting timepiece. But like Kaleidoscope really doesn't work for me.
I was just going to say, and Kaleidoscope, because it's just so boring.
Yeah, I like Dollars more than I think you guys did, but and then the last one is, Love Affair. Is just misguided. Him and the director didn't get along. It's Katharine Hepburn's last performance. It's just not. You want to talk about being too old for a movie? I think that's almost the worst example of it. He's too old for that role.
I think that brings us into our 5-star reviews. So why don't we move into them so we can talk about the stuff that we really liked.
So it's about performance, more than anything. And so I a little hemmed and hawed. And I have to say, I do think I'm just gonna pick Reds because, like we said, I think of Beatty as a producer first, kind of. And I do think with Reds, you get his John Reed is so indelible. I think in that character, he is able to touch on every single thing he does well, right? Like the politics, the hypocrisy of progressive politics, the challenges of trying to run shit from the top, right? Which is like whether that's producing a movie or trying to, write a book / be active in a revolution, right? Like it's all in that movie. So I kept coming back to it and just being like, it's Reds. I mean, Reds is his magnum opus. It's like, it's his Citizen Kane. It's just the movie that I think we're never going to get a movie like that again. Right. And he is so perfect. And I would even agree that Keaton's better, which speaks to Keaton's performance,
But I think he gives it to her. It's funny because I was thinking about this. One of the things I love about Keaton's character in the movie is she's sort of allowed to appear kind of pathetic too. Like she has all that sort of, love and reverence for Emma Goldman, and Emma Goldman's just like, get the fuck away from me. And in a way, she's doing the Warren Beatty.
And and here's the last thing I'll say just about Beatty as a performer. The thing he does better than anybody probably ever, right? And this is, God bless his limited range, but this is so crucial, right? If like Tom Cruise is the best runner in the world, and we all know he is, right? I think the thing that Beatty does, right? He does the what? Like, right? Like, like he's like, what? Right?
Yeah.
Which is to say, right? His John Reed is constantly disappointing Diane Keaton's Louise Bryant, right?
Yeah.
And he plays it like a earnest boyfriend who's trying his best and really earnestly doesn't understand his faults in the way that she understands his faults, in the way that she understands he's killing himself, right? Literally, right? Because John Reed, literally died young because he couldn't stop working, right? So like, there's such a tragedy in that way that Beatty gives you that kind of like, what? I'm doing my best. Like, what's the problem? Right. And you're like, no, you know what you're doing. And like, there's an earnestness to Beatty being like, no, I actually don't know that I do know that. Right. And I think it's such a weird thing to say, but if you've seen Reds, you know what I mean. And I think it's like so perfectly encapsulated in that movie.
All right, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. You want me to come with you to New York? What as? What as?
What do you mean, what as?
What as? Your girlfriend?
What does that mean?
What as? Your girlfriend, your mistress, your paramour, your concubine?
Why does it have to be as anything?
Because I don't want to get into some kind of emotional, possessive involvement where I'm not able to... I want to know what as.
It's nearly Thanksgiving. Why don't you come as a turkey?
You're right. It is his masterpiece. So good pick.
Thank you.
My pick is for a movie that I hadn't seen, even though we had talked about it before, and it's 1998's Bulworth.
Yeah, good pick.
I think Bulworth is just such a fucking gutsy movie that, like you said, Dan, has aged pretty well. I think
I said that, thank you.
Okay, so fuck you, Dan. Actually, Gavin.
I was gonna
please take a
I was
bow.
just gonna let it happen. I was like, I love it. Yeah, I'll take that compliment.
If you don't know, Bulworth is about a senator named Jay Bulworth, and he's at the beginning of this movie depressed and suicidal, and he basically puts out a hit for himself and is going through this like crisis of self. He's coming to realize that the game is fucking rigged all around, and he's essentially a politician who's decided to stop playing the game, and he goes to all these events, and he's just kind of like shooting the shit and being like, oh yeah, well, we did that because we don't care about you and we don't care about voters, and we're, held to lobbies, and I'll tell you whatever the fuck you want to hear, and in the end, I'm going to do whatever I want anyway, or whatever these lobbyists want anyway. And he meets Halle Berry and her friends, who are, these black young women who are cool. This movie also, I think, is just like the perfect encapsulation of that millennial vibe. You get these moments where Warren Beatty is fully rapping and wearing, baggy clothes, and there's a really great scene where he's dancing with Halle Berry at this like after hours club. And they're just like flicking their tongues at each other while they're dancing around. And I was just like, holy shit, Warren Beatty said, I give no fucks. There's this 0 ounce of pretension. And again, I think this movie is just all in service to his message, which is just that like, and especially coming from him, who is so pro-Democrat, pro-lefty, is good friends with fucking John McCain, but he's out here saying, actually, it's all bullshit. No one cares about you. We're not going to take care of you. There's like some magical realism stuff going on that I think is really cool. And I even will say that there are parts in this movie that make me cringe, but I think that's the fucking point.
Totally.
Yo, Bank of America, this table over here, Wells Fargo and Citibank, you really very dear. Loan billions to Mexico and never have to fear, because taxpayers, take it in the rear.
I really was into Bulworth. The ending is kind of also very like lyrical and sad but hopeful. It gave me a little bit of Angels in America, like kind of like call to action type stuff. Find your song.
Yeah, and Beatty and Barry having the chemistry they have is like shocking. It's such a credit to their movie stardoms each.
Yes. Yes, just like both like pillars.
Like that scene in the car is like so lovely,
I feel like I'm maybe playing it safe and maybe picking a bit of a boring pick then, because I actually do really agree with both of you. I think both of those are 5-star performances all the way. But I think the thing that I connected to the most this time was Bugsy. And it surprised me.
Nice.
It really surprised me. I'll be honest.
That's not a safe pick. That's a bold pick, I think. Yeah.
But I think one of the interesting things, and as we mentioned before, Bugsy is this gangster, Benny Siegel, who basically creates the dream of Las Vegas, and he wants to build up the mob through like a quote unquote legitimate money business, where really they would be in charge of essentially the political machine of the United States. And Bugsy's this violent, for lack of a better term, he's mentally ill man who wants nothing more than to just get his way. He wants to control everything in his life, including his mistress, Virginia Hill, who he wants to make his wife, even though he's currently married. He's constantly borrowing money from Meyer Lansky and Mickey Cohen. And, he's way in over his depth, but he's just so confident about everything that he wants and thinks he's going to succeed no matter what. And I think it's such an interesting character study, especially when you build it off the back of playing this Clyde Barrow character that he was so famous for. This is the Clyde Barrow who is completely in charge of all of his functions and still can't pull it off because he's still deranged. And I think it's just really fascinating to watch, and especially obviously like he has great chemistry with Annette Bening, and it's shocking how good, because sometimes when you watch a couple in a movie, and admittedly they weren't together fully yet, but when you watch a couple in a movie, you're like, huh.
Well, Gavin, 3 years later. Same couple.
I know, and yeah, that's a perfect example. They're not great in Love Story.
No, they don't have a great
love affair.
They don't have
Sorry.
great chemistry in Love Affair. Yeah,
no, not at all. But here, it's palpable. It's hot. Like you really, her performance, him feeding into it. It's really fascinating to watch. I think the thing that sold me the most out of anything, though, is there's a brief 10-minute scene, but it is a 10-minute scene towards the about an hour into the film in which he is throwing a birthday party for his daughter.
So good.
And all of Meyer Lansky and his men show up to get their money back, and like in a very threatening way. And so he's running back and forth in a ridiculous chef hat, trying to like light the candles on his daughter's cake and talk these people down. And at the same time, he's just rambling on and on, rambling about how he wants to kill Mussolini because he's rounding up all the Jews, and it's brilliant. And I think if you removed that scene from the movie, you would have a brilliant 10-minute short film on its own. And so that was the moment I was like, Warren Beatty's really good here. And I think I was shocked because we did see a lot of performances where he's not great.
Good. Great. When would you be ready to get started? When I get back from Italy, I'm going to go over there in about a week, so that plus however long it takes. However long what takes? The assassination of Mussolini. Who's going to assassinate Mussolini? Come here.
I will concede, though, I do think both of you picked better full-on performances, but I think there was something about the fact that he didn't direct this one and only played it, but still... I don't know.
Oh, you're right. He's the farthest outside of his comfort zone here, for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I read, because I just looked it up, can I just read the line that Virginia Hill, Annette Bening says that I was referencing earlier? She goes, the rest of the time, you're just some good-looking, sweet-talking, charm-oozing, fuck-happy fellow with nothing to offer but some dialogue. Dialogue is cheap in Hollywood, Ben. Why don't you run outside and jerk yourself a soda? The jerk yourself a soda thing is the best. You're right about Beatty. He's really like, it's probably the last time in his career he's really pushing. Well, no, Bulworth. It's the second to last time. Bulworth and Bugsy are like the last two really strides as an actor. Because even as much as I like Rules Don't Apply, he's kind of. He's not.
He's
I don't
coasting.
think he's coasting for sure.
Yeah.
He's coasting for sure, and he's more director in that movie because Alden Ehrenreich and Lily Collins are the stars. But yeah, Bugsy and Bulworth are two great late period performances.
Was there anything else that you guys saw that you particularly loved? I mean, I'm just going to say right away that I think his performance in Shampoo is so good. Even for a movie I don't particularly love,
Yeah.
I think he's great.
Shampoo's iconic, and you got to mention it because it's probably his most iconic role, I'd say, other than Bonnie and Clyde. And then,
I mean, how could you not mention Bonnie and Clyde?
Bonnie and Clyde being number one. But then, I love him in Parallax View. I think it's a great kind of lead. One of his few straight down the middle successful leading man performances. And then, I mean, I know that I love the dichotomy here, but I truly love him in Ishtar, and I love that Louis. I love that was your 1-star pick because it speaks to the movie. Like I love everything he's doing in Ishtar, and I would agree. I like Dustin Hoffman less, and I think if you like Ishtar, it's probably because of what Beatty's doing / the Grodin pieces. But so I would recommend that with the caveat of like, there's a good chance you'll agree with Louis.
The reviews are mixed.
They are mixed to negative, I think, for Ishtar. But yes,
I don't think he's that good in Splendor in the Grass, but I like the movie a lot.
You know what's funny is I think he's great in Splendor in the Grass, but I think it's the last time he's great until Bonnie and Clyde.
And I think the thing with Splendor is like Natalie Wood, I think, is so great in it.
Yeah,
like,
that's what it was for me.
Yeah.
But before we move into our fast forward, why don't we do our mixed reviews review?
Okay, so my 1-star was Town and Country.
My 1-star was 1987's Ishtar.
And my 1-star review was 1962's All Fall Down.
And my 5-star review was Reds.
My 5-star review is 1998's Bulworth.
And my 5-star review was 1991's Bugsy. All right, let's zoom into that fast forward. okay, he's not really doing that much. I mean, besides making the odd Hollywood appearance, it is his birthday, as you mentioned. So please entertain us with the number of people he supposedly slept with.
So this is from Biskin's book, right? So take this with the biggest grain of salt, obviously. But Biskin does so. Basically, Beatty has said, right, he couldn't go to sleep at night without having sex, right?
Whoa.
So Biskin takes that calculus and is like, well, by that math, the number's got to be basically 12,775 women. Okay.
Was he okay from 18 every day on?
Well, I think that's kind of what Biskin's intimating. It's before Benning, right? And post whatever. Yeah. He was 20 when he was with, Joan Collins, right? Or,
Right.
Leslie Caron and kind of the early ladies. But that's just a crazy number. Let's just say, true or not, it's a crazy number that you could even hear and be like, maybe. Wilt Chamberlain, obviously another famous Lothario who claimed to have far more in his canon, but
not his canon.
I mean, his canon and his canon. His canon and his canon.
Oh, you've really mastered the single entendre.
Hey now.
They calculated that you've bedded 13,000 women.
That was a very busy month. You would have to live a long time to be able to do that. And there's
hello.
Yeah. And nobody twice, and quite a number of people every day. But these numbers, the answer to your question is no.
Is there anything else you'd like to see Warren Beatty do? I mean, he's 86. I don't think. I mean, if he wants to come out and produce something, but I don't know if I don't want to see him playing Old Shampoo anymore. I don't want another Town and Country, and I worry that's what would be the next thing.
Yeah, he was going to star in Megalopolis, which is the Francis Ford Coppola movie that is finally, hopefully, getting made. Obviously, he wouldn't be the star now, so a cameo in that movie would be great, though I would doubt he would say yes. I always love the story. This is, I think, a pretty famous story. When PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, approached Warren Beatty about playing Jack Horner in Boogie Nights.
Yes.
Warren Beatty was famously confused because he was convinced that Paul Thomas Anderson was coming to Warren Beatty to play Dirk Diggler. Which I think is such a great...
That's amazing.
Such a great encapsulation of ego and, Johnny Cannon over here just thinking he's, not 60, but 25.
And here's an interesting thing that I've been thinking a lot about this because we just did, 2 episodes ago, we did a Sidney Poitier episode. And I think that they're interesting mirror reflections of each other. Because I think Sidney Poitier had the talent to back up everything he did. But I also think that he was a really smart man who would have been more in control of his career were he not a black man in an incredibly racist system. And I think Warren Beatty, while complimenting him on both being smart and being able to get his way, I think a large part of it is that he's a white man. Yeah. And so I was they even both get their co-writing credit for the first time around the same time, but most people don't know what the movie For the Love of Ivy is, but a lot of people know what Shampoo is. Right. So it's one of those things where I just kept going mentally back and forth. And obviously, we have you at a disadvantage, Dan. You weren't here for that episode. Even if you did listen to it, you didn't participate in it. I did listen to it, yeah. You didn't participate in it. So I feel like that's kind of a trap for you as a guest. And I don't mean to set it. But it is one of those things where I kept feeling I was man, I wish Sidney Poitier had the chances Warren Beatty had.
No, it's well observed, actually. That's a great comp, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Warren's credit, he obviously had all the opportunities in the world, but wow, I think there are people who have all the opportunities in the world and do
still squander them.
And for all of his philandering or whatever, I think he's the quintessential Hollywood star and reveled in the drama of the social life and all of that, kind of like a Joan Crawford, was just living it up. And but also, maybe knew his limits, and also as far as like, acting went, but also had his eyes just really set on this art he wanted to make, and was just like really, who else could have made Reds? Who else could have made Bulworth? Like he had. That's the thing that I'm taking away from this episode and all these movies is, he had these like insane good looks. He could have just like fucked his way to death, whenever he wanted, but instead he loved one thing more, and that was, these big ideas and making movies about them. And for that, I'm grateful. And, to your point, Gavin, you're absolutely right. And that kind of is like, is overwhelming to think like what more could have Sidney done, and he did so much, but I'm glad and we're lucky that Warren didn't just squander it and flame out like I think probably a lot of very handsome actors do.
Yeah.
There's one quote I grabbed from a Variety interview ahead of Rules Don't Apply coming out from Diane Keaton that I thought was interesting. The interviewer asks, why is nearly everyone charmed by Warren Beatty? And Keaton says, he is curious about everyone. He is so seductive in that regard. He makes you feel like you're the only one, the only person that matters, that you are just absolutely fascinating. And I think that quote is so observant when you think about kind of what we were saying before, like a good con man, right? Like a good producer, right? Who, I'm a producer of smaller things, and I can tell you, like, there's a con involved in all of these things, right? You are fighting, every angle of everything, right? And I think being curious, or at least seeming curious, is a big part of the battle. And I think he really speaks to that. You're doing that better than anybody as a person in his personal life and his professional life.
It takes some self-awareness and knowing, and I appreciate that about him. I don't know what he should do next. A part of me is like, is he still active in like politics? Is he still active in like trying to get shit done? I imagine he's got a buttload of money.
I think he's just, supportive of his children more than anything, right? I think like Annette Bening obviously is still working. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he does too much, right, Gavin? I don't think he does too much these days.
No, I don't think I think he's mostly,
retired.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad place for him to be. He made his mark, and there's only so much somebody can do in their life,
Yeah, and when you've made like some of the absolute bangers he's made, it's like,
yeah. Once again, and I know we've said it a billion times in this episode, he changed Hollywood.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up Warren Beatty. So why don't we take this moment, Dan, for you to plug your stuff? You're involved in so much. Well, it's worthwhile to get it all out there because it's all great.
Well, yeah, thank you. So obviously the Film Stage website, check that out, thefilmstage.com. Me and Connor O'Donnell, we run the B-Side podcast for the Film Stage. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. We talk about movie stars and movie directors, not the movies that made them famous or kept them famous, but the ones that they made in between. And we just did an episode on Ethan Hawke that'll be dropping soon with our buddy Luke Hicks, if you're listening. We just talked to James Kenney, who rescued the final film of the late Peter Bogdanovich called Squirrels to the Nuts, which that's a very interesting episode. So yeah, we're doing stuff like that. Very exciting stuff. And then I also run a little podcast, story podcast called Fathom, which you can find on wherever you listen to your podcasts. On Twitter, it's at Fathom Stories. Gavin has contributed to it. Some of our best stories written by Gavin himself. We're going to have to get Louis on to do a voice. Louis, we're going to have to get you on.
That you guys have.
But it doesn't matter because you've got such a great voice, and we're going to have to get you on to play like a cool villain or something. We got to write something for you.
Would love that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But so anyway, they're like Twilight Zone-y episodes, 5 to 10 minutes. As you're listening, there's a new one that just dropped at either right at the end of March or early April. Check that out.
All great things. Seriously, if you do not follow Dan Mecca online, you really should. He has a hand in 1 million pies, and they're all worthwhile.
Oh, thank you.
So.
DJ Mecca on Twitter, right? Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But if you want to contact us, you can do so by finding us on Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
We're on Facebook. Just type in The Mixed Reviews.
If you want to email us, you can write us a little love note at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
Guess what? We're also on Instagram. Just type in _mix_reviews.
And if you want to listen to the rest of our episodes, just as you've done this whole episode, you can find our back catalog on any major podcast app. We're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Audible. And if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please stop by, leave us a 5-star rating, write us a little review. We'll read it on the show, just like we did at the top of this episode.
Thank you guys for listening so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Dan, for coming back. You're always welcome here.
An honor.
No, the honor is all ours.
Love it.
And so until next time, we will see you in 2 weeks. See you guys later.
Bye.